It was a quiet Sunday evening on Lester Street in Memphis, Tennessee. The neighborhood was settling down. Porch lights flickered on, televisions hummed in living rooms, and children drifted to sleep. Inside one small house, a family gathered, unaware that their final moments together were approaching. On March 3, 2008, Jesse Dodson walked through the door of his brother Cecil's home. What began as a simple visit turned into a heated argument, and then, in a matter of seconds, into something far darker. Fueled by rage and paranoia, Dodson pulled out a gun and shot his own brother. But the horror didn't stop there. Knowing there were witnesses, Jesse turned his weapon and his fury on the rest of the household. One by one, he shot, stabbed, and beat those who stood in his way. The victims were not strangers. They were his own family mothers, fathers, and innocent children. By the time it was over, 6 people were dead, including 4 children. 3 others, all young-bloodied and barely alive, would survive the night only to recount the unthinkable to police. The scene detectives discovered was one of the most gruesome in Memphis history. Walls spattered with blood, small bodies lying motionless, and a silence so heavy it seemed to swallow the air. This was not a crime of passion. It was an act of calculated slaughter, a desperate attempt to erase every witness, no matter how young. And at the center of it all was one man bound by blood to those he destroyed. This is the story of the Lester Street Massacre, and the night Jesse Dodson turned his family home into a house of unimaginable horror. Classification: mass murderer characteristics. Argument with his brother. Number of victims: 7. Date of murders: January 8, 1994, March 2, 2008. Date of arrest: 5 days after date of birth. December 19, 1974. Victims profile: Hallie Cox. His brother Cecil Dodson, 30. The brother's girlfriend Marissa Williams, 27. Hollis Seals, 33. Shindri Robertson, 22. And his 2 nephews, Samario Dodson, 4, and Cecil Dodson II, 2. Method of murder: shooting, stabbing with knife. Location: Memphis, Tennessee, USA. Status: sentenced to 18 years in prison on November 21, 1994. Released on parole on August 27, 2007. Sentenced to 6 death sentences on October 12, 2010, November 9, 2010. The man, already sentenced to death 6 times for the city's worst mass murder case, received an additional 120 years in prison Tuesday for beating and stabbing 3 children who survived. Neither the relaxed, smiling Jesse Dodson nor his lawyers had anything to say in his defense, as the judge and prosecutor said, "Dodson has no regard for human life." In my 40 years of being in the criminal justice system in Shelby County, I've seen a lot of cases, and I don't know of anything more legally aggravating than this, said criminal court judge James Beasley Jr. I guess we're used to seeing adults as victims, but it is uncommon for us to see children get killed, to see children mangled and butchered like this. In my opinion, Mr. Dodson should never be allowed to walk the streets of society again. He's given up that right. In imposing the maximum sentence, Beasley gave Dodson 40 years consecutive for each of 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder. Last month, the jury that convicted him of the 6 Lester Street murders gave him death sentences on each one. Prosecutors Ray Lapone and Reginald Henderson said the additional sentences are more than legal window dressing. These are 9 separate cases with 9 separate victims, and we're using every legal measure to make sure he never walks the streets again, said Lapone, noting that each conviction will be reviewed on appeal. Each victim deserves a sentencing hearing. He brutalized those children and left them to die in that house. Dodson, 35, who had served almost 14 years in prison for a 1994 murder, was convicted of shooting to death his brother Cecil, 30, on March 2, 2008, at 722 Lester St., and then eliminating witnesses including Marissa Williams, 27, Shindri Robertson, 22, Hollis Seals, 33, and Cecil's children, Samario, 4, and Cecil II, 2. Jesse Dodson, the children's uncle, then beat and stabbed Cecil C.J. Jr., 9, Cedric, 5, and Senia, 2 months. C.J., who was found with a knife protruding from his skull, and Cedric both testified that Uncle Jesse was the lone attacker. The dead and injured were left in the house for some 40 hours before they were discovered. The children were devastated, said their grandmother Ida Anderson, who now is raising the children. This is something that has wrecked them completely. The children have been in counseling. The whole family has been in counseling. The grandchildren want to know why it happened, why he killed their parents. The children loved him, Uncle Jesse. All I can tell them is that God is in control and that he will take care of us. A special needs fund, established for the children 2 years ago by First Baptist Church on Broad, raised $139,000 and was placed in a trust in probate court. Last month, officials issued a new plea for continued social and financial support, setting up the Dodson Children's Benefit Fund. Donations can be made at any Bank Tennessee branch. People have contributed to our needs, but our lives have been turned upside down, Anderson said. The children have undergone surgeries and have more to come. They're still scarring. Jesse Dodson's execution date is set for March 2, 2012, 4 years to the day after the murders, though a delay is a virtual certainty. Automatic appeals typically continue for more than a decade. Jesse Dodson timeline. November 21, 1994, pleads guilty to second-degree murder of Hallie Cox in bad drug deal. Gets 18-year sentence. Aug 27, 2007, released on parole. John 26, 2008, parole and sentence expire. March 3, 2008, Dodson's brother. 3 other adults and 2 children are found shot and stabbed at 722. Leicester St. 3 children are critically injured. March 8, 2008, Jesse Dodson confesses after one of the surviving children identifies him, Uncle Jr., as the lone attacker. October 11, 2010, Dodson is convicted on all counts. Ost 12, 2010, Dodson receives 6 death penalties. November 8, 2010. Dodson receives an additional 120 years in prison. October 4, 2010, Memphis 10, CBS AP. The same jury that convicted Jesse Dodson of savagely killing 6 people, including his brother and 2 young nephews in a Memphis home 2 years ago, sentenced him to 6 death sentences Tuesday, 1 for each life he took. In less than 2 hours, jurors sentenced 35-year-old Dodson to die by lethal injection for the shooting murders of his brother's girlfriend, and 2 other adults, and the fatal stabbings of his 2 nephews ages 2 and 4. 3 other children were stabbed but survived the grisly massacre. Dodson was convicted Monday of 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder, in addition to 6 counts of first-degree murder for the 2008 attack. Authorities say the grisly massacre is marked as one of the city's worst mass murders. Police say that after a day of drinking, Jesse Dodson shot and killed his brother Cecil Dodson in the head during an argument in the early morning hours of March 2, 2008. He then went after everyone else in the house with 2 guns, boards, and several knives. Cecil Dodson's girlfriend, Marissa Williams. 4-year-old Samario Dodson. 2-year-old Cecil Dodson II and friends Hollis Seals and Shindri Robertson were also killed. Jesse Dodson, an ex-convict, showed little emotion as criminal court judge James Beasley imposed the death sentences Tuesday. He merely nodded as officers escorted him out of the courtroom. Jurors listened to more than 2 weeks of emotionally grueling testimony before convicting Dodson. But it was the personal account of one of the survivors, 11-year-old Cecil Dodson Jr., that helped convince the Tennessee jury that it was Dodson who committed the crimes and not members of a gang, as he had alleged. The boy, known as CJ, was 9 years old at the time of the attack and waited some 40 hours for help until he was found in a bathtub with a 4.5-inch knife blade lodged in his skull. CJ solved it, said Prosecutor Ray Lapone. He had the courage to come in here and point out his uncle. The boy, his 8-year-old brother, Cedric Dodson, and Jesse Dodson's mother were key prosecution witnesses. The young boy told jurors in his testimony that he went to call for police and tried to fight off his uncle before ending up in the bathtub with a kitchen knife embedded in his head. Paramedics testified they thought he was dead until he started to twitch. According to authorities, Dodson, who was released from prison about 7 months before the killings for a previous murder conviction, fled from the house by riding off on a child's bicycle. He is set to be put to death March 2, 2012. October 12, 2010. As a state prosecutor finished his impassioned plea for the jury, to return the death penalty Tuesday. Against convicted mass murderer Jesse Dodson, the defendant clapped his hands softly in mock applause. His attorney said Dodson was not surprised when the criminal court jury later sentenced him to death 6 times once for each of the 2008 murders on Leicester Street. Their guilty verdict in 90 minutes the previous day sent a clear message, the attorney said. He was disappointed, but not surprised, said lead defense attorney Gerald Scahan. When the jury came back with the quick guilty verdict, he knew the death penalty was probably a foregone conclusion. Judge James Beasley Jr. set Dodson's execution date for March 2, 2012, 4 years to the day when the 6 men, women, and children were shot and stabbed to death. "May God have mercy on your soul," the judge said, as Dodson was led away by officers. The 9 women and 3 men of the jury, chosen in Nashville and sequestered in Memphis, deliberated less than 2 hours before agreeing on the sentences. Defense attorneys had asked for life in prison without parole. Automatic appeals will continue for years, however, making the execution date mostly a legal formality. Dodson, 35, was convicted in the worst mass murder case in the city's history. He's a convicted killer out of prison, just 5 months, and he kills 6 people, including 2 children. State prosecutor Ray Lapone told jurors, in asking for the death penalty, "If not this case, what case? If not that defendant, what defendant gets the death penalty?" The children were chased down and carved up with kitchen knives. You know those 2 women were begging for their lives. And now Jesse's begging for his. Across the courtroom, Dodson shook his head no, and moments later mockingly applauded as Lapone took a seat. For the afternoon part of the sentencing hearing, Dodson changed from street clothes back to jail clothes that revealed forearms heavily tattooed with playing cards, dice, and other designs. Earlier in the hearing, 2 jurors wiped tears from their eyes as they viewed photos of the young children who had been beaten and stabbed to death at the house. Dodson, 35, was convicted of killing his brother and another man, 2 women, and 2 children on March 2, 2008 at 722 Leicester. He told police and his mother that he killed his brother during an argument and then began eliminating witnesses. He also was convicted of 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder for beating and stabbing 3 other children, including 2 who told jurors that he, their Uncle Junior, was the lone attacker. Jurors returned the death penalties after finding aggravating circumstances, aspects that increase the enormity of a crime for each victim. At least one such circumstance is required in each case when prosecutors seek the death penalty. Cecil Dodson, 30, Jesse. Dodson had a prior second-degree murder conviction, and he posed a great risk of death to 2 or more others when he killed Cecil. Marissa Williams, 27, same as above. Also, the murder was committed to eliminate her as a witness, and the defendant committed mass murder of 3 or more people within a 48-month period. Hollis Seals, 33, same as above. Shindri Robertson, 22, same as above. Cecil Dodson, 2, same as above. Also, the victim was less than 13 years old, and the murder was heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and involved abuse well beyond that necessary to cause death. Samario Dodson, 4, same as above. The children were repeatedly stabbed and beaten with boards. Prosecutors Reginald Henderson and Damon Griffin noted that Dodson's calm courtroom demeanor during most of the 14-day trial dissolved into anger when he testified on cross-examination Saturday. "I think we saw the real Jesse on Saturday," said Griffin. "You saw some anger and some rage. That was the real Jesse. He couldn't hold it in." For the defense mitigation expert Glory Shettles told jurors that Dodson came from a broken family that moved frequently, was a disciplinary problem at home, and at school was an 8th grade dropout, and was 19 when he went to prison for 14 years for killing a man. "There was a lot of movement, a lot of instability," said Shettles, who works for Inquisitor Inc. He repeated the 4th grade twice, not because his grades were bad, but because he missed so much school. There was an absence of a stable home life. That was very important. She said that during his 14 years in prison, he had 1 family visit and a few phone calls. Beasley set a November 12 sentencing date for Dodson's 3 attempted first-degree murder convictions involving the children ages 9 years, 5 years, and 2 months at the time of the crimes who survived their stabbings. Dodson will be the 88th inmate on Tennessee's death row and the 34th from Shelby County, which has by far more than any other county in the state. October 12, 2010. Memphis 10, CBS AP. After listening to more than 2 weeks of emotionally grueling testimony, it was the personal account of an 11-year-old victim that helped prosecutors convince a Tennessee jury that his uncle was guilty of 6 murders in one of Memphis's worst mass slayings, a prosecutor in the case said. Jesse Dodson shot his brother in the head during a 2008 argument and, attempting to eliminate all witnesses, killed 5 other people, including 2 of his young nephews. He then stabbed 3 more boys who survived after waiting in agony for some 40 hours until help arrived, prosecutors said. 2 years later, 2 of the boys who survived the bloody Memphis rampage pointed to their Uncle Jr. as the man who fatally shot their father and mercilessly left them for dead. One of the survivors, 11-year-old Cecil Dodson Jr., known as CJ, was found in a bathtub with a 4.5-inch knife blade lodged in his skull. CJ solved it, said prosecutor Ray Lapone. He had the courage to come in here and point out his uncle. The boy, his 8-year-old brother Cedric Dodson, and Jesse Dodson's mother were key prosecution witnesses. In less than 2 hours, jurors convicted 35-year-old Dodson. The penalty phase of the trial begins Tuesday, when the same jury who convicted the mass murderer will decide whether he should be sentenced to death by injection. In his testimony, Jesse Dodson claimed gang members were responsible for the horrid attack, but juror concluded that it was in fact Dodson who committed the crimes. Authorities say that after a day of drinking, Jesse Dodson shot and killed his brother Cecil Dodson in the early morning hours of March 2, 2008. He then went after everyone else in the house with 2 guns, boards, and several knives. Cecil Dodson's girlfriend Marissa Williams, 4-year-old Samario Dodson, 2-year-old Cecil Dodson II, and friends Hollis Seals and Shindri Robertson were also killed. The young boy, who was 9 years old when the attack occurred, told jurors in his testimony that he went to call for police and tried to fight off his uncle before ending up in the bathtub with a kitchen knife embedded in his head. Paramedics testified they thought he was dead until he started to twitch. According to authorities, Dodson, who was released from prison about 7 months before the killings for a previous murder conviction, fled from the house by riding off on a child's bicycle. The jury was selected in Nashville because of an intense local coverage of the case. September 28, 2010. Memphis 10, CBS/WRE. Prosecutors say Jesse Dodson committed one of the worst mass killings in Memphis history on March 2, 2008. The 35-year-old had been out of prison several months when an argument at his brother's house turned violent, police said, and he gunned the man down. Desperate not to return to jail, he tried to rid the scene of witnesses, shooting and killing 3 other adults, then using knives and boards to kill 2 of his brother's children and seriously injure 3 others, a prosecutor said at his trial Monday. A defense attorney countered in his own opening statement that there isn't enough evidence to convict him and that the brother had gang ties that could have played a role in the killings. Dodson has pleaded not guilty to 6 first-degree murder charges in the slayings at the Memphis house. Dodson also is charged with 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder. Prosecutor Ray Lapone said Dodson shot his brother Cecil Dodson over their argument, then attacked the rest of the people in the house to eliminate witnesses. Authorities said he then fled on a child's bicycle. He wasn't going back to jail, ladies and gentlemen, and he did whatever he had to do to get out of that house with no witnesses, Lapone said. Dodson, who served prison time for murder and was released about 7 months before the killings, confessed to police and to his mother days after the bodies were found, Lapone said. According to CBS affiliate WREG defense attorney Marty McAfee, argued prosecutors don't have enough evidence. There is no DNA connecting Jesse Dodson to the scene, while police also found several unidentified fingerprints and hair from an unknown Asian person, McAfee said. The victims and the suspect are black. McAfee also said Cecil Dodson had ties to Memphis's gangster disciples and suggested the killings could have been gang-related. Cecil Dodson recently had a falling out with a gang member and even called the police to a gang member's house, McAfee said. The jury was chosen last week in Nashville in an effort to find people unfamiliar with the case. In addition to national media coverage, the investigation was featured on A&E's reality crime television series, The First 48. Shot to death were Jesse Dodson's 30-year-old brother Cecil, Marissa Williams, the brother's 27-year-old girlfriend, and Hollis Seals, 33, and Shindri Robertson, 22, a couple who were at the house visiting. 4-year-old Samario Dodson and 2-year-old Cecil Dodson II also were killed. March 8, 2008, in a mass murder so gruesome it garnered international attention and caused police to consider gang conflict. A child witness led investigators to a family member who confessed to the brutal killings. Jesse Dodson, 33, was charged Saturday with 6 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder. DIST, Attorney General Bill Gibbons, said he would announce in the coming days whether his office will seek the death penalty. During an argument with his brother at 722, Lester Jesse Dodson pulled out a semi-automatic handgun and shot Cecil Dwayne Dodson, police allege. He then slaughtered the others in the house, including children, in an attempt to cover up the shooting. Cecil Dodson, 30, Marissa Renee Williams, 27, Hollis Seals, 33, and Shindri Robertson, 22, were shot and killed. Jesse Dodson also stabbed and killed 2 of his nephews, Samario Dodson, 4, and Cecil Dodson II, 2, both sons of Cecil, police say. It is our belief that when Jesse left the home, he believed everyone in the home was dead, Police Director Larry Godwin said during a Saturday press conference. But as we all know, by the grace of God, 3 children survived. Cecil Dodson Jr., about 9, Cedric Dodson, about 6, and Sanaya Dodson, about 2 months old, survived being attacked with a knife and are in treatment under protective custody at Le Bonheur Children's Medical Center. One of the surviving children told police Jesse Dodson was responsible for the killings, according to an affidavit filed Saturday. Dodson then confessed to the mass murder. For Dodson, the gruesome killings on Leicester Street made for an end to what was at times a hostile relationship with his family, arrest records show. His teenage home at 600 S Lauderdale was a volatile place where he regularly fought with neighbors and siblings. In 1990, at age 15, Dodson was charged with disorderly conduct for making threats against his mother as she tried to discipline him. A month later, he was charged with assault after a 13-year-old told his parents Dodson punched him in the face and threatened to put him in the hospital if the teen didn't bring him $25 the next day. 1 year later, in fall 1991, police arrested Dodson for disorderly conduct after his mother told police he came home and wanted to fight his brother. After placing her son in bedroom, locking the door, Dodson broke door open and punched several large holes in wall, the arrest report stated. Dodson then placed his finger in mother's face, telling her he was going to kill her. When officers arrived, Dodson was loud and angry, refusing to calm down and still wanting to fight brother. Police charged Dodson again in 1992 with disorderly conduct following an incident in which Dodson cussed at a neighbor during an argument and then threw 2 beer bottles into her apartment. On December 13, 1991, 6 days before his 17th birthday, police pulled over a car Dodson was riding, an arrest records show. On the floorboards, an officer saw a 20-gauge sawed-off shotgun and a .38 caliber pistol. A little more than 2 years later, and 1 year into adulthood, the 19-year-old Dodson was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in an apparent drug deal gone bad. On Jan 1994, after purchasing drugs from Dodson, Hallie Cox discovered he had in fact bought shavings of soap. The 2 men argued, and during the conflict, Dodson killed the man. 4 months later, on May 5, 1994, police arrested Dodson for the murder. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, second-degree murder, and spent nearly 14 years in state prison. He was released January 26 and rekindled his relationship with brother Cecil, who worked as a maintenance man at an apartment building and rented the Leicester Street house just north of Summer Avenue in Binghamton. But as in his youth, Jesse's relationship with his brother came with conflict. On January 29, 3 days after the man's release from state prison, Jesse Cecil and several other men were playing cards at Cecil's home. After the card game, Jesse stood up, put on Cecil's leather jacket, and began to walk out of the house. As Cecil tried to stop him, Jesse drew a semi-automatic pistol and challenged his brother to take the coat back from him, Cecil would later tell police. Cecil then followed his brother in his car to the Goodwill Village apartments in North Memphis, but eventually lost him. Although Cecil reported to police that his brother robbed and threatened him, Jesse was not charged with a crime. Whether the stolen jacket remained an issue between Cecil and Jesse is unknown. But last Sunday, Jesse returned to Cecil's home at 722 Leicester, police say. An argument followed. It ended in a bloodbath. Although Jesse is now in police custody, the investigation continues and the victim's family members remain in protective custody, said Godwin. When asked if he was certain that Dodson acted alone in the killings, the police director offered an ambiguous answer. "We are very confident in where we are, but again we will continue the investigation," he said. Erica Smith, the mother of one of Cecil's children, said, "Dodson's arrest for the mass murder hasn't brought her relief. I'll never be relieved," she said. "I've never got my son no more." Cheryl Green, the sister of victim Shindri Robertson, said she was surprised to learn Dodson confessed the killings.